very warm welcome to you all. I notice I'm very grateful that you're all joining me this Sunday evening, taking time out. So thank you. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Libba, or sometimes known as Elizabeth Granger, and I teach MBSR for Openground in Sydney. But I also am the co-founding director of Openground for organisations. So that's where we're delivering and developing and delivering a range of different programs for a range of different organisations and workplaces, which is another passion. So yeah, it's a bit of background to me. But given we're all joining in different spaces and places, I thought it might be nice just to all help us arrive in this virtual co-created space together before we begin with the actual topic. So in whatever way feels comfortable for you, if you want to close eyes, you can close eyes, or you can just have a soft gaze averted to the floor. But let's just take a few moments to arrive in this space that we find ourselves in. You may notice there's some residue of whatever you've just been engaged in, whether it's been conversing with others, dining, logging on. Noticing if that's anywhere in the system, any thoughts, feelings. Noticing your emotional tone that's here right now. And then as best you can, falling from the head and really letting your awareness drop into the body. And having a sense of really landing in the body. You might have a sense of your sit bones. And the immediate felt sensations of whatever posture you're in. And just taking a few moments to really arrive in this moment. You may feel the coming and going of this breath. And quite deliberately, just letting go of whatever has been, whatever you've been doing, been involved in. And seeing if you can really open to this moment with a real freshness of attention, curiosity. Who knows what's going to happen? And then opening eyes and and welcome again. And also to those people that sort of logged on while we were just doing a brief dropping in practice, arriving practice. Thank you again. So I don't know if anyone wants to say anything just from that dropping in or arriving practice. feel free to unmute yourself if you do. But otherwise, I thought we'd move straight into the theme of this session. And I have to give an acknowledgement here to Mary O'Malley. So the title of this session actually came from a book that she wrote. And I've modified the title from her book title. Her book is called What's in the Way is the Way. And I also have to confess, I've never actually read the book. So I've never read the book, but I always loved that phrase. It's on my to-read list, my very ever-expanding to-read list. But I loved that phrase because it really captured in quite a neat, apt little way something that I've been exploring and continue to explore in my practice, which is all those kind of unwanted moments that come in our practice and how to work with them and how they can really be a gateway, if you like, into transforming how we relate not only to those states, but also to ourselves and aspects of ourselves. So that's what I really want to be exploring tonight, but also potentially an apology I should offer, because having never read the book, I don't know if that was what she intended by her book. It might be completely different to that. So I'm using it in my own way, if you like, certainly not trying to deliver anything she's written, having not read it. But that's where the title came from. And that's what I'm really interested in, because I think most of us come to practice with some wish, whether it be some wish to deal with some state, some condition we've got, diagnosable or not, whether it be to find some more ease and peace in terms of how we're managing our lives and the busyness of them, our minds, our bodies, all these different reasons that we come to practice. And then, of course, as we sit down to do our practice and in the course of our practice, up come the very things that we don't necessarily want, all those kind of unwanted experiences. And yet these can be little nuggets of gold, if you like, in terms of actually helping us, as I said before, finding a way to relate to these moments differently, and in a way that's been different from how we have been, so that they create less distress and stress, because often that's what's brought us to the practice, some form of stress, distress, etc. So they're almost like the way through, if you like. And yet, as we all know, our hardwired response is actually to move away from them, to get rid of them, fight them, do battle. There's so many myriad forms of avoidance and distraction. And yet I think they can also specifically be moments of practice that we can turn towards and investigate and get closer to as a way of really finding out more about our minds, the nature of experience, in a way that can free us up. And I wanted to share a few words from a very wise woman that many of you may well have heard of her, Pema Chodron. And it comes from her book, When Things Fall Apart. And in particular, she's talking about these unpleasant experiences and unpleasant moments. And many of you may well have read this book and know it, but it's always good to hear these things again, I think. And she writes, generally speaking, we regard discomfort in any form as bad news. But for practitioners or spiritual warriors, people who have a certain hunger to know what is true, feelings like disappointment, embarrassment, irritation, resentment, anger, jealousy and fear, instead of being bad news, are actually very clear moments that teach us where it is that we are holding back. They teach us to perk up and lean in when we feel we'd rather collapse and back away. They're like messengers that show us with terrifying clarity exactly where we are stuck. This very moment is the perfect teacher, and lucky for us, it is with us wherever we are. Most of us do not take these situations as teachings. We automatically hate them. We run like crazy. We are used to all kinds of escaping. All addictions stem from this moment when we meet our edge and we just can't stand it. There are so many ways that have been dreamed up to entertain us away from the present moment. So that's what we're really going to be hopefully exploring more tonight and in this session. And it's this edge that she's talking about. So whenever we come up against that unwanted moment, experience, something that we don't like arises, how do we work with that at that edge? And I love this quote, and I love this about the practice, because I think it can really free us up and open up our practice, because often we do have, even though we know mindfulness is about being present with whatever arises, I think we often do have this subtle wish to have a lovely, peaceful experience in our practice. And yet, what would it be like if we really can sit to have no other agenda except to become more and more intimate with what does arise and really get to know it, and in this befriending way. So it's also got this quality of attention that we're bringing that can help transform how we are with it, how we can be with what arises. And that way it means that there's a lot more freedom. It doesn't mean that this shouldn't be happening. Anything and everything that arises is part of the practice and actually something we can find a relationship to. This is really, really important. So it's not that this shouldn't have happened or we wish it wouldn't have happened. Of course, that might come up. And yet this is what's here, to get to know, to get to understand, to get to really become intimate with all the different aspects of it. And in that way, I think we start to get to know the nature of our own mind in all the various different conditions, circumstances that arise. And there's something that, I suppose there's the self-regulation piece of it, which is how we can regulate ourselves and not be so reactive in these moments. But then there's also this wisdom piece, which is how it can actually give us an insight, more of an insight into the nature of our mind, how we think when we're in that state, how our body feels when we're, held or flooded by a strong emotion. And this is more of an insight piece, and starting to get to really understand the nature of these experiences as part of the human condition, in fact, which is what they are. We all experience so much, as I'm sure you've all had experience of in your own practice. So that's what I want to explore. And of course, it's very much easier said than done, like how do we be with, whatever arises. So I thought before we did the formal practice, we'd go through we'd have a few experiments about how to work with this edge, if you like. And there's a number of different options for working with the edge, depending on what arises. But common to all options, and first and foremost, is that, first of all, it's the noticing what's here. So it may be that you're practicing with a particular object of attention in mind. It could be the breath, it could be sensations throughout the body or sounds or whatever. And then, of course, the mind will drift off elsewhere or be taken elsewhere or hijacked or whatever it is. And it's that very moment of noticing, what's here? What's taken me away from whatever the chosen object was, your intended object? And then in that moment, it could be a really little thing. It could just be noticing it and maybe naming it. Oh, anxiety's here, irritation, there could be physical pain. It could be simply just a little simple mental noting and then a returning to the chosen object of attention. And that in itself is of great value, because in that moment you're loosening the hold that has on you. Or you could take it a little further. So it could be the noting that's there, and then notice what happens, how do you relate to what's here? This is particularly if it's unpleasant, some form of discomfort, emotional, physical, otherwise. Because as I said before, often there's quite automatically some form of that fight, flight, freeze, avoidance mechanism that comes into play. So you could simply notice what's arisen, and then what can really help is to go into the body and just see, how is the body responding? Is there some part of the body that's braced? There's some part of the body that's contracted. a pocket of tension, perhaps something's tightened up, the eyes have hardened. You can really explore. So I really want to explore this in the practice tonight, and for you to explore. And as soon as you can feel that in the body, the invitation is simply just to soften, that tightness, the tension, the holding, the bracing, and see what happens. And in that very act of softening, a little more space can be created around it. So I thought we might just have a little experiment now where we, just to give you a clue, and then we'll do another experiment afterwards, and then we'll go into a period of formal practice where you'll get more opportunity to work with it in a longer way. But I thought just now to give you a taste that if you could all bring to mind, and you can do this in closed eyes, or you can just have a soft gaze lowered to the floor. And if you bring to mind just some little worry or concern, something that's niggling, and it's probably important for the purposes of this exploration not to pick something that's too hot, that's too intense or too highly charged, because we really want to be able to pick up the subtlety of this approach. So maybe just bringing some little worry or concern to mind. And as you do, just noticing how it's making you feel. And you might even note internally to yourself, or worry, or anxiety, fear, irritation, frustration, whatever's here. And dropping into the body right now and just seeing how the body is responding. And perhaps there's a part of the body that you can catch just tightening, or the breath's been shortened or held a little. Some part of the body's been clenched or contracted. And literally just let yourself soften that little pocket of tightness, tension, hardness. And sometimes deepening the breath and just letting the breath reach into this area. Touch into it, just helps you soften around, in and around. You can help take the edge off the edge, so to speak. And creating some space. So opening eyes, and does anyone want to share what they noticed just through that very brief exploration of just how to soften around the edge? Does anyone have an experience? And just unmute yourself, or if you can't, use the chat function and I can unmute you. What people noticed. Or not, if it didn't shift anything, if it wasn't accessible. And you can also use the chat function as well. Or if you want to raise your hand to speak, you can also do that and I can unmute you. No? No observations? No comments about that? Yes.
Yes, I'm always ready to talk.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Yes, I've just had a little operation on my eye, a little procedure. They call it little. To me, it doesn't seem little because it's the eye.
Yeah.
And that was on Friday, and I couldn't pick anything else because it's sticking out there. So And it seems to be getting worse. It seems to be filling up with pus again. So I'm going to have to call them on Monday unless it gets better tonight.
Uh-huh.
So I felt a lot of different tensions in many different spots in my body. And it was nice dressing them and giving them a little bit of a soothing space. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. And so could you actually feel parts of you soften in response? Yeah.
There's one part in my shoulder which didn't, but other little places, you know, I could just feel little relaxing and oh yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Sort of just creating an idea of a soft space around my eye, which is sore.
Yes.
So it's so much easier to grasp because it is actually physically irritating.
Yes.
Mentally irritating.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
To soften the mental irritation around the physical irritation.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Exercise.
Yeah. And did you notice you could then be with it a little more, with a little less distress or reactivity, or was that a little, yeah.
Good to handle at the time.
Yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah. Any other experiences anyone else want to comment before we move on? Oh, from Jeff. With me, I often notice I find it hard to soften. Sometimes my mind drifts into a dreamy kind of state before I can then soften. Aha, aha. Interesting. Yeah. So when you say you find it hard to soften, can you say more, Jeff, or not really? It's just the...
Yeah, it's like a resistance to sort of letting go. I'm not quite sure why. I don't know if you can hear me okay, but...
Yeah, no, beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's some kind of a resistance.
Okay. And so I wonder, and you might want to explore if that happens, the allowing the resistance. Resistance here. Do you know what I mean? Because that often comes up, doesn't it? There's an invitation to relate in a certain way, and then we can find that. It's like, resistance. And in the allowing, something may be able to soften. Because I think the softening and the allowing are they sort of come together. Do you know what I mean? The allowing, we're softening. In the softening, it's an allowing.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
So play around with that and see what, see if what happens. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the other, another thing I wanted to offer to you this evening as part of this sort of working with our edges and softening around them so as to create a little more space and allow us to be with them and ride the wave, so to speak, is also about the quality of attention that we're bringing. And sometimes I think, well, not sometimes I think, I've learned the hard way, but all these forms of unpleasant experience, for want of a better word, they are actually forms of distress, or stress, distress, suffering. And what can often help is that when you name whatever it is or you note it, it can also be a secondary note, if you like. It's like, this is a moment of stress, or this is a moment of distress, or this is a moment of suffering, in fact. And there's something about that acknowledgement that can literally, and it may not, so again, this is just an experiment and an invitation, and you can play around with this, but it may also help you open your heart a little to your own distress. So this is the quality of trying to be with ourselves in our own distress, in fact. Because anger, rage, even though we don't usually call them that because they're so kind of fiery and enlivening, etc. But they are also a form of suffering when we're sort of flooded by rage, etc. So that was another part of the experiment I wanted to do, which was how to actually be with ourselves, find that edge, soften, but also what happens if you can also acknowledge, this is a moment of suffering, or if that word doesn't do it for you, find your own word, distress, stress. And I mean, I've automatically just put my hand on my heart because that sometimes helps me be more open-hearted with whatever's arising. And it may be that you want to put your hand somewhere that feels that it can give you some soothing, some comfort to help you lean in and be with this, whatever it is that's arising, and help you ride the waves of the sensations, or it can just be metaphorically speaking. And something I also learnt from Tara Brach was she often begins her practice, and she, in the setting up of posture, and I'll do this when we do the formal practice, but she invites you to do a little small smile on the face. And this smile, there's something about bringing this smile, just a very subtle smile, and it actually softens the facial muscles in the forehead. So already there's a softening in the face. So you can all just try it now if you just sitting, and then just lightly just bring a very subtle smile to the mouth. And you might see if there's, or feel if there's a little easing of the muscles through the forehead. And it can really, that stance can really help us create that sort of inner welcoming stance that we are doing to all of our experience, if you like. So these are the things I'm going to invite you to work with in this next period of practice. One thing I did also want to say before we went into practice, and a third way of working with the edges, particularly if something's very hot or it's just so intense, and you're so kind of, oh, it's just got you. It's just got you. It's holding you tightly, and the softening doesn't come, the smile, you forget the smile, etc. And you realise you're really being sort of flooded in that moment, is you could really open your attention wider and just open to any part of the body where there is a sense of groundedness perhaps, or a sense of ease, or some more fluidity or something. So you're really widening the awareness, and then just feeling into that, just to give you a little bit more stability and steadiness, so that you don't have to go into that really intense experience if it's a level of intensity that just feels too hard to manage. Does that make sense? So that you can find another place to hold it in this wider container of awareness. So there are a number of options. Are there any questions before we go into practice about anything I've suggested so far? Just give it a whirl, shall we? And then see, and then we'll have time for questions and comments afterwards. So we'll do practice, and in this practice I'll lead you in, and we'll begin with some guidance, but then in the latter half of the practice I'm going to give you quite a lot of silence, just to give you an opportunity to really work with what arises, and then these ways of working with our edges, so to speak. Yeah. So just finding a posture that feels comfortable, setting yourself up so that there's also a felt sense of wakefulness, alertness, but also a sense of ease. And taking a few moments just to feel into the immediate felt sensations of your posture. And also seeing if you can access a sense of groundedness in your posture, particularly in the lower half of the body. Groundedness, balance. And yet also feeling into the length of the spine. So we're sitting tall, and yet not holding it too rigidly, too stiffly. But there may also be parts of the body that can also soften even as you sit tall. You might feel some more softness through the face, softening eyes. Then you might want to experiment with bringing this little smile to the face, just turning the corners of your mouth upward a little. And just feeling what that offers you in the body. And also having a felt sense of openness, receptivity through your posture. You might feel this through the face and the chest, perhaps. And in your own time, just turning your attention inward to the flow of this breath. And wherever you can sense it, moment to moment. Touch of air as the body takes in air, lets it go. Then you can continue to use the sensations of breathing as an object of attention throughout this practice if you like. Or you can use a different object of attention, whether it be sensations throughout the whole body, sounds. But the rest of the practice will largely be in silence, except for periodically I'll just chime the bowl once, and that can serve as a bit of a question or a reminder perhaps. What's here right now? Or also as a reminder just to notice, how am I relating to what's here? as an invitation simply to soften, make space for, allow. Whatever's arising. Or the single chime could help remind you of the smile, bringing it in again as a way of helping you befriend what is here, bringing a warmth, a friendliness, with a wish to really get to know more deeply, more intimately all these moments that arise. And the practice will conclude with the sound of 3 chimes of the bowl. So coming out of that when you're ready. Yeah, and just wondering how people went, what they noticed, any observations, questions emerging from your experience. Tony, yeah.
Can you see me? Because I'm having trouble this end. I can't see you, but I can hear you.
Okay, I can see you. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. I decided that I was going to work with, just the allowing, and to use the smile to do that.
Yes.
And I find it quite powerful. That little movement of the smile just sort of softened things, and brought a bit of lightness to I don't know, to my body, to everything.
Yes.
And the longer we went on, the more things, the more distractions came in. But I tried to go back to the smile, and the softening would happen. And then I'd go back to the breath. So yeah, I found that quite powerful. Thank you.
Well, it's really tower of practice.
Yeah, well, that too, but
yes. Yes, but really helpful. It's something, and it almost, that slight change, it actually does something to the whole physiology a little bit, doesn't it? That little shift there, and it just creates a softening, and also as how we are softening towards the experience as well, the allowing, as you say. Yeah.
Well, that's what I found, that in softening and lightening, it really felt like there was more space for the the distraction or whatever was coming up to be there, without me having to actually engage in it or judge it or whatever. So yeah.
Yeah,
That was my experience.
Beautiful, great, thank you. Yeah. Others? And including others where it's like didn't do a thing for you. All experiences are welcome, as in our practice. And questions as well. But like if it did shift how you noticed you were with difficulties or moments, or helped you be with it, or create space, as Tony said, or one of the things I've noticed it's really helped me do, similar to what you were talking about, Tony, is soften that reactivity in a sense, but then in that allowing I can really get to, it helps me get closer in, like I can lean into it more as opposed to be a little further, there's more distance between it. I can really, and I think it's the heart opening stuff too that penetrates. You can get closer to it and become more intimate with it, and then get to investigate, what are the sort of thoughts that come up, and how my body feels, and ride the waves of the sensations. And yeah, there's something that it changes that. Yeah. Yes.
As usual, I'll speak again. I found it interesting when you were describing the smile, and I tried it. It flooded me with childhood memories of being forced to smile and be happy all the time.
Wow.
So that's just very personal.
Yes.
What I found happening is just what you're doing now. I found myself nodding a little bit, and I thought, aha, I could do a little nod instead of a smile, and that worked similarly to what Maria said. So just the slightest nod worked for me in a very similar way.
Yeah, and I think that's the beauty of the practice, isn't it? We can all find, like, these are just invitations, offerings, and we really find our own way through trying out different stuff, and some things really resonate with others, and other people it just doesn't cut the mustard at all, and you know what I mean? And we can really find our own way, and to that end, it really is a practice, isn't it? We are practicing, and we are practicing being with ourselves with different, in different ways. So, yeah, but thank you. Interesting. And that nodding, was the nodding, what did that offer you? Was it sort of a validating thing or an acknowledgement? Did it help you acknowledge, that was it that?
Tiny, very tiny. It was as if I was listening to myself.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Yes, validating, acknowledging. Yes, this is here. It worked exactly the same way as you described it.
Yeah, great. Excellent.
Yeah, thank you very much for that.
Yeah, wonderful. You found your own way. That's so great to hear. I love that. I love that we're all so different, and we all have to find our own way, and there is no right way. I just love that about the practice. I really do.
But I didn't do that all by myself. It was from the hint you gave.
Yeah.
What I love is that the fact that you gave the hint, I went, and then something else arose from that.
Yes, exactly. Beautiful. Yeah, great. Yeah.
Really appreciate that.
Yeah. So pleased. Anyone else? I'm trying to do screens. There's a comment. What was the name of the book you mentioned at the beginning of the session? What's in the Way is the Way by Mary O'Malley, which apparently is great. I want to read. And Linda. Yeah. Someone said that what works one time may change and not work another time, or works for a little while only. That's so true. Thank you, Linda. That is so true, that we do something and it really helps open something up or shift something, and then it might lose its utility or its efficacy, and then something else comes. And again, this points to the practice being a practice and evolving, as are we. It's so dynamic and ongoing. Yeah. So we've got a few minutes left if anyone has questions or other experiences to share. or not, as the case may be. So shall we, if there's nothing that's...
I was just going to say, Libba, I did really appreciate the length that we were given to do the practice in, because sometimes when we have these meetings and webinars, you know, you tend to have shorter practices. But I really enjoyed having that time to have the time to get into it and to kind of work with.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So thank you.
Yeah, no, pleasure. Because you do need space, don't you, to let it. And I also didn't want to do too much leading, because then it gets in the way too.
Yeah, yeah. So thank you. That was good for me anyway.
Yeah. And for others, I apologise if you wanted more leading. But, you know, we can't get it right, can we? So, okay. I thought I'd read, if there's nothing more, but feel free to. There's a poem, if I can find it. This is it. Yeah, we might finish with this. It's by Karen Mason Miller, and it's called Who Turns? Who turns this into that? Sound into noise, aroma into odour, taste into pleasure or disgust? Who turns yes into no? Grace into unkindness? Who turns the present into the past? Who turns the now into the not now? As it is into as it should be? Silence into boredom? Stillness into restlessness? The ordinary into the menial? Who turns pain into suffering? Change into loss? Grief into woe? Woe into the story of your life? Who turns stuff into sentiment? Desire into craving? Acceptance into aversion? Peace into war? Us into them? Who turns life into labour? Time into toil? Enough into not enough? Who turns why into why not? Who turns delusion into enlightenment? Who thinks? Who feels? Who senses? Who turns? All practice is the practice of making a turn in a different direction. So I leave you with that, and hopefully that's helped you, making practice to turn in a different direction with those unwanted moments, and gives you a little more ease. And thank you. Thank you for your practice and your presence, everyone.
Thank you, Libba.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.